All the arrays we've made so far have been one-dimensional. That is, whether the elements within the array are referenced by name, as in an associative array, or by number, as in a numeric array, all the elements are laid out in a straight line. It is possible in PHP and other scripting and programming languages to create what is known as a multi-dimensional array. This allows us to structure our data in more useful ways. Let's take a look at an example and see how this works. Say if we wanted to store an array containing all the names of the books on our bookshelf, or a small sample of them, for the sake of our example. We could simply make an array and add all the titles straight after the first open bracket of the array, as we've been doing before. However, if we wanted to split the array up into sections, what we would do is to create a multi-dimensional array, which is simply an array of arrays. So, in this case, let's say we had the fiction first, and what we do is we open one array, then straight away the first element in that array is going to be another array. This may look a little confusing, but once we come to reference it, it will all become clear. Let's put in some titles here. So that's our first inner array. We close that bracket, we put a comma, and we move on to the next element of the outer array, which is also going to be an array. So every element within this array is going to be another array, for the sake of this example. Now it might be easier if we put this array on the next line and bring it into line with the other array. This is not, and I must stress, this is not for the sake of PHP deciphering our script. This is simply for the sake of looking back at it as human beings and being able to read quickly and easily what's going on, so that we don't end up going off the side of our text editor here, so it's hard to read, and so that we can see that these arrays are one on top of each other, so that it's easy for us as programmers to look back and understand what we were doing. So in this array we're going to store some non-fiction books. So just 2 in there. And then we close the bracket for this array. Then we're going to put in another bracket. And the reason for that is that we open one bracket here, and this array has contained both these arrays, and although we've closed this bracket to end this array was started, and we need to tell PHP that that's the end of the array there. The end of that line is semicolon, and then we move down. You'll notice that the reason we can treat this whole line here as simply one line is that PHP will consider everything one line until it reaches a semicolon. That's why there's no problem about, say, splitting this text over 2 lines. Now let's see how we reference such an array. Use our trusty echo command, and we're going to reference books 0, 1. Now this is very similar to referencing a normal array, but we simply put the outermost array first, and then the inner array. So in this case, element 0 of the outer array, which will be this array, and then element 1 of the inner array, which will be this element here. Let's trace that. Let's save that rather, and see what that looks like in the browser. Echoed Frankenstein. As we can see, element 0, and then element 0, 1, Frankenstein. Now, we could, of course, split this into as many dimensions as you like. I'll just show an example with 3. And although you can continue with more 4, 5, or 6 dimensions, you're generally not going to come across use for more than 3. So let's just show a quick 3-dimensional example. We're going to split this array here into genres, let's say. So we're going to put another array in here, and let's put some more titles in here, some more science fiction titles. And we're going to pop another array on here. Now, what have we done here? So I'll open the first array, open an inner array, and then we have an inner array within that, which consists of 3 elements. Then we have another array, which consists of 2 elements. Then we close two lots of brackets here, because we're closing both this array and this middle array. Let's see if we can find how to reference, for instance, Do Robots Dream of Electric Sheep. We'd need the outer array, first element, which would be 0, and then the middle array, first element, also 0, and then we want the third array here, which will be 2. Let's save that and make sure that works. Do Robots Dream of Electric Sheep. It's perfectly possible to make your arrays, your multidimensional arrays, associative. So in this case, we could say fiction. Oops, that's correct symbol, and we could say sci-fi. And here, let's bring that over there so it's underneath the sci-fi, and we'll say horror here. And for this one, we're going to say non-fiction. So then when we come to reference our arrays, we're going to have to say fiction for instance horror element 1, which would be the second element here. Let's make sure that one works, and we'll refresh the browser. Dracula, just as we thought. So here we can see that multi-dimensional arrays are a good way of storing more complex structures within an array. We can also see that we can use associative elements within our array structure. Once again, I suggest you play with this because, again, this is a little bit more to digest than some of our previous movies and chapters. So once you've had a look at that, we'll move on to the next movie. Now we're going to have a look at two functions which turn arrays into strings and strings into arrays. First of all, let's take these are known as the Implode and implode functions. Let's start our PHP script, and we're going to start by taking an array. Let's call it the array fruit, and that's going to contain 3 elements, and we're going to turn that array into a single string called list. The way we do that is to use the implode function, and that takes 2 parameters. The first of which is a short string, which is what it's going to join in between each element within the array. If the elements in the array are going to be the bricks in the new string, then we need to put what we're going to use as the mortar. We could just use a space. Let's use AND to make it clearer what's happening. Then the second element that the implode function takes is the name of the array itself, which in this case is fruit. So let's echo our new string list to the browser. Let's save that, and we'll take a look at this in the browser. As we can see, each element within the array has been added to the string, and in between each, the AND string has been used as a joiner. So the implode statement is a quick, easy way of turning an array into a string. Now, let's take a look at the companion function to that, which is known as explode. Let's take a simple string and we can, using our explode function, we can split that into the elements in an array. So we use our explode function there in a similar syntax, but this time the first parameter that the explode function takes is going to be the character that the explode function is going to look for within the string and choose that as a delimiter for splitting off one element from another in the new array. So in this case, let's take the character space. This is going to split up each word, because between every word there's a space, so it's going to split every word apart from another and make the new array consisting of each word within the sentence. The other parameter is, of course, the string which is going to be used to create the new array. Now, in order to output our new array, let's use a for loop. Similar to the one we used before. And we're going to, every time this loop executes, we're going to trace word number. We're going to close that concatenation operator, and we put the word number in another concatenation operator, double quote, space, and is, and then we're going to say words, our new array, element number variable I. And at the end of that, we're going to put an HTML break tag. Let's have a look and see how that works. As we can see, our script, our string rather, has been split and each word has been used as an element within the new array. So those are some quick and easy ways of converting between strings and arrays. In this movie, we're going to look at two new string functions that we haven't looked at before, and find a way of using these string functions to manipulate strings. And we're going to find a way of splitting a string right down the middle, or at any other point we choose. Let's take a look first of all at the Str Len function. Now this function finds the length of a string that we specify. So let's take any sentence here. And if we use the Str Len function, it just takes one parameter within the curved brackets, and that is the string that we wish to find the length of. We'll save that and go over to our browser. As we can see, 36. So all Str Len does is very simply find the number of characters in that sentence, the number of spaces, letters, numbers, whatever. Another very useful function in PHP, string function again, is the sub-str function. And what this does is it allows us to take a string and then create a new string by taking a small portion in a way that we specify of the old string and making a new string out of it. So, for instance, if we took a different sentence, and then we use the sub-str function, then we can split it up. The sub-str function takes three parameters, the first of which is the string that it's going to work on. The second is the point at which we're going to start looking for characters to make a new string. So let's say we start at 5, and the third parameter is optional. So let's see what happens if we just use the two parameters there, and we'll pop back here. As we can see, it starts with the word can, or more accurately, it starts with the letter C. If we go back here, we'll see that it's missed out T, H, I, S, and that first space there. And the reason that it starts with C is that counting from the beginning, T is character 0, and we've got character 1 is H, we've got character I is character 2, and the S is character 3, that space will represent character 4. And then this C, as character 5, starts our substring, and it returns this. The third parameter that sub-str can take is a length, as in the number of characters that it's going to count from the starting character to until it's going to stop counting, and that'll be the string that it returns. So say if we just wanted to take 5 characters after character 5, we go back here and refresh, as we can see, C-A-N space B. 3 letters, a space, and a B. That makes 5 characters. So as we can see, the sub-str function is very useful for splitting up strings. It makes it very easy. Here's a practical application using both those functions that we've just learned, Str Len and sub-str. And what we're going to do is we're going to find a way of dividing a sentence in half in the middle, the exact center of the sentence. How are we going to do that is, let's say we're just going to echo the two halves to the browser, and that's going to we're going to make sure that way that we've split it at the right place. So we can use substr along with our sentence variable, and then we can start at 0, because this is going to be the first half, so we need to start at the first character, which is called 0, and then we're going to go to the middle. Now we used Str Len earlier to find the length of the sentence, so to find the middle we simply divide by 2. Then we're going to put in an HTML line break to split those two up, and then we're going to do another substr command, and this looks very similar to the last one, except that as the second parameter we're going to take the middle of the sentence, and then we're not going to specify a third parameter, so it's going to go all the way to the end. Let's take a look at that in our browser. As we can see, that split our string right in half. It's my little mistake there. I didn't put in the B, so it doesn't make sense, but let's run that again. As we can see, this time it's split halfway through a word, because as it counts, it doesn't pay any attention to words or spaces. It just treats all characters exactly the same. So there we can see the way we can use these functions to deal with strings and produce new strings in a flexible way. In our next movie, we're going to look at ways to replace words and phrases and even single characters within. Another string function within PHP allows us to take any string, find all instances of a particular word or phrase or any set of characters, and replace them with a word or phrase of our choosing. Let's take a look at an example. First of all, we'll need some kind of sample string. And then we're going to need to use the strReplace function. Now strReplace, and you'll notice that there's an underscore between those two words. You need to put that in to make sure that it's spelled correctly, and PHP will correctly identify the name of the function. This function takes three parameters, I'm sorry. The first of which is the string or set of characters that we want to find and replace. In this case, let's say old. The next parameter is whatever we want to replace it with. Let's say new. The third parameter is whatever string we want this to act on. Now, strReplace does not affect the original string. What it does is it returns the value of the string after the replace function has been done on it. So if we wanted to actually change the value within sentence, we would have to make sure that the new value was assigned to sentence. For our purposes in this example though, let's just echo the result to the browser. Let's save that. And we'll take a look at our browser. As we can see, every instance of the word old has been replaced by the word new. So we can see that str replace is a good, simple way to replace any set of characters within a string with any new set of characters of our choosing. In this movie, we're going to be taking a look at regular expressions and the way they're handled within PHP. You may not have heard the term regular expression before. Simply put, it's a way of defining a certain pattern of characters that we're going to check against any string that we wish to check them against. This can be useful if, for instance, we want to make sure that a user is only inputting letters rather than numbers. That's a simple example. Regular expressions can handle very complex patterns and express them very concisely within our scripts. Now, you may not immediately see a need for regular expressions with what we're doing at this stage, and it's quite a lot to take in over a couple of movies. You may want to come back to these movies later on. If you don't get it straight away, that's no trouble. You can just come back to these later and learn them as you need to. However, regular expressions are very useful, and it would be worthwhile you at least watching these movies now to get an idea of the kind of things that you'll need later on as we begin to create more complex scripts. PHP has support for two standards of regular expression. First of which is POSIX style regular expressions, POSIX, and the second of which is Perl compatible regular expressions. The POSIX standard is compiled by default along with the regular PHP installation, and so that's the one that we're going to be looking at now. Now, the string function that we use in order to deal with regular expressions is ereg. Let's start up a sample script, and we're going to use our standard variable sentence and put in some sample data. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this ereg function. We're going to use it with an if statement. What ereg does is it returns either true or false, depending on whether the regular expression that we define as one of its parameters is found within the string that we ask it to check. The first parameter will be the regular expression that we're asking it to check against. Let's use a very simple one. Just going to use the word word. And then the second parameter that the ereg function takes is sentence, the variable sentence. We're closing two sets of normal rounded brackets there. One because we opened one here and the other one there. The inner one is for the parameters of this function, and the outer one to define the limits for the if conditional. So if this function is successful and the word word is found within sentence, then we're going to echo regular expression found. Let's put an else clause in there as well. So over here we can see regular expression we're using. It's a very simple one. Word. Let's take a look. And it did find that pattern within the string. Now the pattern that we defined here was a simple set of letters. Regular expressions allow us to use a number of symbols to define patterns without piling up a whole load of if clauses and else's and splitting our strings down and generally using a lot more functions than we need to for a simple pattern check. So, for instance, we can use this symbol, and what that says is check for this word here, word, at the beginning of the string. So if we go back here, we'll see the regular expression was not found because it wanted word at the beginning of the string, and it wasn't. So if we change that to this and check that in the browser, we can see that it's happy with that because the word this was right at the beginning. If we used this and save that, check that in the browser, it's not going to be happy with that. And the reason for that is that this function, ereg, is case sensitive. Now there is a case insensitive version, eregi, and that will return true for that search. However, we're just going to use the standard one for now. Another symbol we can use to specify is the dollar symbol. If we go back to Word, take a look here, and refresh, we can see that it's not happy with that either, because it hasn't found word at the end. What this dollar symbol means, very similar to the other symbol we just looked at, is that it's looking for this string right at the end of the string, and it hasn't found it because it's also found there's an S in the way, which means it's not locked right onto the end. If we added the S there and saved, we could go back and we find that the regular expression was found. If we use both together, then we'll find that, go back and refresh, it's not happy with it. The reason for that is it wants to find words in the entirety of the string. What it means to use both of them together is it locks this side to the beginning, that side to the end, so the only string it's going to be happy with is finding that exact match, and then it's going to say it found it. So there are two characters that the regular expression system uses to limit a certain pattern to the beginnings or ends. The curly to specify a number of times that a character or set of characters is to be found. Say, in this example, the number there is 3, and it's going to look back at the character that came just before, and it's going to say, do we find 3 instances of Z, one after another? So this sentence here, if we check that, it'll test true. It found the regular expression. However, if we take away a Z, it's not going to be happy with it because it wanted exactly 3 instances of Z. If we, for instance, however, if we put a comma after the 3, then it's going to be happy with a minimum of 3, but however many we want. So this would test true. If we put between 3 and 5, then what it's looking for is a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 5 Zs. Let's take a slightly more complex example. And we're going to test this time for the evil laughter, represented by MUWA, and then as many HAs as we want for good measure. A minimum of 2. Now, let's take a look at the way this works. This looks a little bit complicated. What we're saying is we want to see this part of the regular expression somewhere in the string, immediately followed by these 2 letters, and we put them inside the normal brackets, and what that does is that it means that this part of the expression, which is the counting part, will come straight afterwards, and it will know that it's dealing with both these letters H and A, rather than, if we didn't use these rounded brackets, it would just simply be looking for 2 or more instances of A following H. What we're looking for is 2 or more instances of HA. And let's put that within our and we'll take a look and see it has found our expression, because we had about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and because we put the comma after the 2, it's looking for any number as long as it's more than 2 of HA straight after MUWA. There are short forms of the certain forms of this, of the numeric checking. We can use plus, and what this will mean is it's going to look for 1 instance of HA, or we can use the multiply sign, and that will mean that it's looking for 0 or more instances of HA. So it'll be quite happy in that case with simply that. However, if we use the plus sign, it's going to be a little more stringent, and it's going to want 1 or more instances of HA. So when we go back here, it's not going to be happy with it. As we can see from this movie, the symbols that we're used to using within PHP mean something quite different within regular expressions. We're going to take a look at a few more examples of the syntax of regular expressions in our next movie.